The way the Chicago White Sox won last night is why you can have hope for the future. And does it also mean Miguel Vargas is owed an apology? Let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan. I write for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the bullpen blew a 1-0 lead in the ninth, but at least Steven Wilson only gave up a solo home run to Elly De La Cruz. And instead of losing in extras, the White Sox did something unusual. They won. And I'll discuss how three young players you should pin your hopes to for better days came through, and does one of them deserve an apology from the fan base? Then the White Sox have three players on the 10-day IL on rehab assignments, and if everything goes well, those guys could be ready to come off the injured list soon. So let's discuss some couple interesting roster decisions the team has to make when those three get back. And finally, it's Wayback Wednesday, and there's some huge news regarding the reinstatement of Shoueless Joe Jackson. Let's discuss Shoueless Joe's case to be in the Hall of Fame. All right, so I think White Sox Recap podcast host Ryan McGuffy, formerly of NBC Sports Chicago, he put it best on X, formerly Twitter, when it came to last night's 5-1 victory over the Reds. And for those watching on YouTube, I've got the tweet up at Ryan McGuffy. One of those nights where you look at a hashtag White Sox box score and it features 6 hits and 5 RBI from Meidroth, Vargas, and Quero. There are definitely things to be excited about that didn't exist at this time last year. And to get on my broken record kick, I've said before, last year at this point, all you felt like was, well, maybe Corey Lee's going to be your backup catcher. And that's about it. You really didn't have any other viable pieces at this point where you could say that guy's going to be on the next good team. And that's all we can look forward to right now is when will the White Sox be better? And for those that are always skeptical, if you do look at the, franchise historically under Jerry Reinsdorf, it's always ebb and flow, always ebb and flow. Usually what happens is the franchise succeeds despite itself because they do find a way to collect some prospects when they bottom out, but then the owner doesn't pay and we go in this vicious cycle all over again. But at least this time, the White Sox came through in extras and they won a game based on 3 young players you and I should hope develop into core pieces for the next good team. And if Elly De La Cruz doesn't crush a Steven Wilson pitch near to, basically to Kentucky, because he hit that ball a country mile. He almost hit it out of the ballpark. I mean, I think it went almost 9-10 rows up. But if De La Cruz doesn't crush that home run in the ninth, it basically would have been Edgar Quero winning the game on his own because he drove in the only run in regulation that was part of his 3 hits to show, okay, baseball, you've come for me. You're not taking my career. I'm going to make the adjustment to the adjustment. I'm going to be a good big league player. So bravo for Quero to say, no, you're not taking me out of the game. And he also made a nice throw down to third to catch Connor Joe trying to steal third base in the 8th that kept the Sox ahead 1-0. And Jordan Leisure actually owes Edgar Quero a steak dinner for that. One moment. Gotta hit the... Still battling these lingering effects of the cold. However, it does look like Wilson is turning back into a pumpkin as he gave up his 2nd straight home run. So he could not get the save, obviously. But enter Chase Meidroth and Miguel Vargas, who came through big in the 10th inning as Meidroth hits an RBI single to put the Sox up 2-1. And then it's Vargas who just slams the door shut on the Cincinnati Reds with that swing adjustment with the swing adjustment he made. He takes a 95-mile-per-hour 4-seam fastball and crushes it over the left field fence. I'll repeat that again. 95-mile-per-hour 4-seam fastball over the left field fence. 3-run shot. And, obviously adjusting his hands on the bat and where he rests the bat, now it's a little bit more to where he can get the, his bat quicker to the ball. If that's all it's going to take to get him to be at least a solid 1.5 F4 to 2 F4 player, maybe beyond, let's dream, then you got to give Ryan Fuller and Marcus Thames a lot of credit for that. And I know we don't like to give the hitting coach a lot of credit, but if that's all it takes to revive his career, good job, fellas. Because since that change has been made, he looks like, again, a viable major league player and someone the Sox can move forward with at third base. However, that still does not mean an apology is owed to the man for writing him off last year. As Dylan Barnes of Future Sox, he tweeted this out, and for those watching on YouTube, and I'm not throwing shade at Dylan. I actually like at Not Cease's work. He tweets this: Miguel Vargas deserves apologies from every single account who wrote him off last year. Do it now before he gets better. Okay. For the record, also on my end, I did say in the offseason I was willing to give him a second chance. And I'm not throwing shade at Barnes. Because again, I think it makes for good discussion. There's nothing wrong with him throwing that out into the world. But the reason no apology is owed is two things can be true. You can still hate the trade that brought Vargas to the South Side, and how it appears that they did not have much of a plan nor the infrastructure to develop him when he got here. But at the same time, yeah, you can now be hopeful that he's a viable player to move forward with. Those two things can be true. Because I don't want to relitigate the trade to the Dodgers. Okay? That 3-team trade, I'm tired of relitigating it. The Dodgers will for always ever be the winner since they won the World Series with the two pieces they got. But the one thing that it got me thinking of, in terms of, instead of not relitigating it, but re-looking back at it, think about it. He gets here and Pedro Grifol has no clue where to position him. He had no clue. He had no plan. He tries him out at left, and I recall a couple comedic errors. Pedro gets fired a few days later, and Grady Sizemore immediately says, guy profiles at a third base. He's my everyday third baseman. It took the guy that you literally had to ask, do you want to manage this team for the rest of the year? To say, yeah, not only that, Miguel Vargas isn't a left fielder. He's not a second baseman. Look at his size. He's a third baseman. We're going to put him at third base. And he also came to the team with having major struggles hitting velocity at the big league level. And again, you drop him into this chaos of losing and this awful manager, and you take a guy from a first-class organization like the Dodgers, and you drop him in a third-world organization like the White Sox. No wonder why the guy was traumatized. And I think Getz made a miscalculation in that he just thought, oh, well, Vargas didn't get a runway. He got 374 at-bats with the Dodgers. He got a runway. He just had a lot of flaws, and the Dodgers just didn't have time to fix him. They couldn't afford to. So all Getz had to say, if he knew in the back of his mind, hey, I'm going to add a hitting director, then just communicate that at the time of this acquisition is, we like his talent. He needs work. Help's on the way. We're just going to get him assigned a defensive position, reps for the rest of the season at the defensive position, and we'll do a ton of work in the offseason, because that's what they did. That's basically what happened. They were just waiting to get him to the offseason. The only thing that I never will ever give Vargas grace for is don't act like a hostage when you finally got a chance to be a star, because that's what he's got. He's got an opportunity. You might not think he's a star, but he's got an opportunity. He's got to start, a chance to be at least a star on the White Sox. I know it's a low floor and a low bar to clear, but he had a chance and he acted like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing in the world. What am I doing here? So he doesn't get any grace or apologies for that either. But he does get a ton of credit for putting on the weight in the offseason like they asked, and then making that swing tinkering. And again, I'll go back to my broken record. Every game he keeps looking like he's going to be a 1.5 to 2 F4 player. And again, the Sox need those guys. They need those guys to raise the floor. And if he can do that going forward, I'll take that, especially since third base in the league is currently providing some of the most terrible value and production we've ever seen in league history. So those moving the goalpost too in the replies to Dylan, yeah, his overall numbers don't look great, but he has an 8.27 OPS so far in May, an 888 OPS over his past 15 games, and a respectable 792 OPS over the past 30 games. So do you need to apologize for being a hater? No, because he still needs to keep proving it. I mean, okay, you're doing a good job. Keep moving, keep going. And that's the whole point of this season. But should you get back in the let's give him a second chance? I'd say so. Well, the White Sox have a couple of guys set to come off the 10-day IL in a few days, and it's going to be some interesting roster decisions that they have to make. And let's discuss that after the break on Locked On White Sox. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for the trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM. That's supplyhouse.com/TM. And start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. So I'm not sure when Mike Tauchman will return, but considering I watched some of the AAA Charlotte game yesterday, and he had a flyout where he just didn't even run to first base, he probably won't be with the team by the end of the week. Now, to be fair, he may have thought the ball was going foul, and it just, stayed fair or a little bit to the foul pole area. So maybe that's why he decided not to run. But either way, Tauchman, Austin Slater, and Corey Lee, they're all now on their rehab assignments. And if everything goes well, obviously they should be back with the big league club soon. Now, obviously they can easily reshuffle the outfield if Tauchman comes back before Slater by taking Joshua Palacios off the 26-man roster. Because I love how my man Beefloaf, and I'll show his tweet in a few seconds about why I'm talking about this in the first place, has basically dubbed Palacios Tauchman's understudy. And that's what he's there for. That's all he's doing. So you can easily get him back on the 26-man roster and not miss a beat. Where it gets interesting is, what do you do with Lee and who gets removed off the 26-man roster once Slater is ready? And then this is the idea brought up by our guy, Beefloaf from the 108.com. That's going to probably make some of you guys that are on the camp of give the young guys a runway very upset, because it might mean Brooks Baldwin has to go down because he's the only one really on the roster with an option left. So this is what he tweeted out at Mr. Delicious 13 on May 12th. With regards to all of this, you have to remember that Getz is in accumulating mode, ... trying to keep around as much stuff as he can until they can fully evaluate it. So the option years end up mattering a lot in IMOI. And excuse me if you keep hearing all this dinging. My wife left her phone by where I'm recording, so quickly remove that. But anyway, he then also tweeted, given the mixture of players and that he's got 3 minor league options, I wonder if Brooks Baldwin gets demoted for a bit in here while this shakes out. So, yeah, that's a possibility. And another thing I keep thinking is, if Tim Elko has a couple of more offers, does he go back down? First of all, in terms of Lee status, you do have 2 options with him. See if you can get a contender to already jump the market for a liable backup catcher and trade for Matt Thaiss, or you can just keep Lee down in the minors if you can't find any takers for Thaiss. So handling Lee, a lot easier because he's got minor league options. He can stay down there. It's fine because you're not, again, Edgar Quero has hit enough where he should never be going back to AAA ever again. But in terms of Lee, you could obviously have him still catch. You can move Edgar Quero then down. Not Edgar Quero. You can move Omar Narvaez back down to AA to help tutor again Schultz, Hagen Smith, and Grant Taylor. You can do sort of that stuff while Kyle Teel gets more reps at catcher. Although again, I would still prefer Kyle Teel to be getting reps in the outfield, and you could just have Narvaez and Lee rotate at AAA Charlotte. But you have options. It's what do you do with Slater? Because he's on a major league contract, and Jerry's not just going to pay him to go away. So to me, Baldwin getting demoted option might be a thing, because first, the lineup last night had Josh Rojas playing in left, and that's normally where Baldwin has been played at lately because he's the next generation Larry Garcia. Although Baldwin was a late inning sub for Lenyn Sosa, so they could be thinking, hey, you know what, we'll just keep him in the utility role, but maybe it's not a super utility role for now. And secondly, does it make a ton of sense to just DFA Jacob Amaya? However, once Andrew Benintendi comes back, who do you want not getting regular at-bats? Baldwin or Amaya? That's going to be the key issue too, because again, where can you get some regular at-bats for Brooks Baldwin right now is in the outfield. Even if Austin Slater comes back, he probably would be playing in right, or he just might be a platoon option, kind of guy off the bench. I don't see him actually getting regular at-bats, just like how Michael A. Taylor isn't getting regular at-bats either. They're still playing Baldwin and left, but when you get Benintendi back, and if you still have Elko up, and you still have Andrew Vaughn, you can't hide Benintendi at DH that much. So where do the regular bats come from? So you still want Baldwin to get regular bats, even if it is at AAA, until you can get someone to take Josh Rojas off your hands, because that's the whole point of the exercise of having him on this roster. Showcase him for another contender. Hopefully they'll give you something decent back. Maybe a reliever prospect who actually has a shot to make it to the big leagues. That's all you're hoping for Josh Rojas. But with Tim Elko up, again, that's why I think if Tim Elko, who's off to a 1-for-10 start, it actually wouldn't shock me if he's the one that gets sent down, especially if he keeps striking out and not getting on a heater soon. Because remember, the front office basically told you silently what they thought of Tim Elko. It took them forever to promote him. So it makes you think that if he, say he starts off, say he gets maybe 3-4 more hits and he's 5 for 22 when Slater or Tauchman are ready to come off the IL. What makes you think that they're just going to be like, well, see, told you. It's organizational depth. Back to Charlotte you go. We'll call you up when we trade Andrew Vaughn. That I could see too. And I think those are the things that are going to infuriate some of the folks in the fan base. By the way, Tim Elko, please get a few more hits, maybe some more home runs, because I cannot endure Andrew Vaughn much longer. He had another base running gaff, charging home to third base, charging home, and completely out. Now, I love the one of the Vaughn truthers on X who tweeted out, well, it would have just been a double play turn. I mean, the Reds first baseman, his eyes never turn to second base. It's not even a thought, because he's like, oh my gosh, Andrew Vaughn, super slow, is running. And you could say, well, okay, if Vaughn stays stationary and a double play is turned, it's ruined. But what if the ball is thrown? What if there's a throwing error? Vaughn doesn't take these things into account. And again, I mean, I know manager Will Venable has said if there's not a chance for double play, don't run. But at the same time, Vaughn is just not smart, and he's not fast. He couldn't even score on Lenyn Sosa's single. And I know it was hard hit, but still, if you got some speed, you could probably take a shot. With him, it's like, well, basically it's 2-3 hits that you got to get him in from a double. Again, it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back with this guy. That's why, please, Elko, please, I'm begging you, man. Now, one potential roster headache has already been addressed. Gage Workman, he was DFA'd as he was set to come off the IL. He got that he had a hip flexor injury. Ooh, my hip. Oh, my arm. That type of stuff. But his rehab assignment was wrapping up. White Sox, he got returned, and the White Sox were like, you know what? We've seen enough. We kicked the tires, and this ain't for us. And I got no problem with the White Sox taking a chance on Tater, but he was sort of redundant in that, again, you have Vargas to be your everyday third baseman. You got Elko and Vaughn rotation at first, and again, you're trying Baldwin out as the next gen Leary, so you can't really use Workman in the outfield either. So I get why they're like, you know what? We tried, gave you a look, gave you a few games, and we don't like what we see. So, yeah, see if the Tigers will pay you $50K to get him back, or if another team will pay cash considerations to see if he can be a big leaguer. And if they don't, fine, throw him down to AAA. It doesn't bother me. It's just, you could tell that when he made that error at third base, and he's been struggling at third base defensively for the Cubs, you could tell maybe he's a little overwhelmed by the moment, because he's supposed to be this great glove, this great defender, and he made 3 bad errors, 2 for the Cubs and 1 for the White Sox, and then talking smack to the Cubs too when he left. But for those right now pulling your hair out and being like, why does this even have to happen? It's because, again, Tauchman and Slater, they're on major league contracts, and the owner isn't just going to pay them to go away. Plus, think about a lineup with Tauchman and Meidroth at the top of the order. Now you got two heavy on base guys at the top of the order, and if you got Edgar Quero making the adjustment to the adjustment, you got a chance to score some early runs. You got a chance to score more runs throughout the game. And it would be nice if Luis Robert Jr. provided some consistency too and help out with scoring runs, driving them in. So it turns out semantics finally went out, as Commissioner Rob Manfred has determined a lifetime ban means just that, during a lifetime. That means he has removed Pete Rose and Shoulless Joe Jackson from the ban list. And let's discuss Shoulless Joe Jackson's case for the Hall of Fame on today's Wayback Wednesday after the break. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts. This show is available on all major podcast platforms. Again, sorry, I had to hit that cough button. It's just this nagging little virus that just will not go away, so don't worry. I'm playing hurt for you. I'm here for you to watch the train wrecks and report, at least today, there was some good news. And to those clutching their pearls, and USA Today's Bob Nightingale wrote one showing just how hard he's clutching his, along with the quotes he got from others. Lifetime is defined by Webster's as the duration of existence of a living being, such as an animal or a person, or a thing, such as a star or a subatomic particle. And if you want to use it in the form of an adjective, Webster's defines it as long duration or continuance. And I cite the dictionary because that is basically what Rob Manfred, a former lawyer, is citing when he reinstated Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson when he took them off the lifetime ban list, since, well, they're no longer with us. They are no longer alive. In fact, Shoeless Joe Jackson's been dead for about, I think he died in 1951. Okay? Rose died in 2024. So, yet somehow past commissioners, especially like Bud Selig, acted like Joe was still alive because Ray Liotta played him in the Field of Dreams, and they kept him still on the banned for life list. When, if you're going to use that semantically, isn't life over when you die? At least earthly life? So this is long overdue for Shoulless Joe Jackson. Now, you can have your opinions on Pete Rose and betting on baseball and how it affects the integrity of the game. I fully agree that the punishment should be a lifetime ban. Keyword again, lifetime ban. But as Rob Manfred realized, when you're dead, you're posing no threat to the game anymore. Because that's what Manfred said. Quote, obviously a person no longer with us cannot represent a threat to the integrity of the game, Manfred wrote in a letter to attorney Jeffrey M. Lekoff, who petitioned for Rose's removal from the list January 8th. Moreover, it's hard to conceive of a penalty that has more deterrent effect than one that lasts a lifetime with no reprieve. Therefore, I've concluded that permanent ineligibility ends upon the passing of the disciplined individual, and Mr. Rose will be removed from the permanently ineligible list, end quote. And then again, that also applied to Shoeless Joe Jackson and the other 8-man out in the 1919 Black Sox. They're off the list now. So they are, at least Shoeless Joe for sure, is eligible for the Hall of Fame. You can also, maybe I think Earl Weaver and Eddie Seacock also had, obviously I wasn't alive, but and pretty much all of us weren't alive. But, when you look at back at the numbers, we can read history books. They also had some compelling cases for the Hall of Fame, but it's definitely Shoeless Joe who had the case. Now, Shoeless Joe's involvement in throwing the series has always been considered sort of a true unknown since he hit 375 in the 1919 World Series. Historians Jacob Pomeranke and David Fletcher, they did go over some court transcripts when Jackson sued Charles Comiskey for back pay, and he sued him, I think, in 1922 because he got banned for life in 1920 after he signed a 3-year, $8,000 contract. For that time, that's a lot of money. So he sued because Charles Comiskey refused to pay him. And this is from the Fox32.com's write-up of the work that they did, and this was back in 2023. In the new transcripts, Shoeless Joe flatly denied taking the $5,000 offered by gamblers, but other witnesses, including his wife, tell a different story. Quote, his wife saw him get the money, Pomeranke said. It was big denomination bills. She had to deposit at the local bank December 1st, 1919. They had the bank tell her come. They had the bank receipts for a $5,100 deposit. I mean, they had the goods on them, end quote. The book reprints hundreds of pages of testimony from the key players involved in the fix. Testimony the historians say clearly points to Jackson's guilt. Quote, there are a lot of people who still believe Shoueless Joe had nothing to do with the Black Sox scandal, Pomeranke said. And what the research has shown is he really did. He took the money. There's no question about it. Whether he played his best on the field for the White Sox is still up for debate, end quote. Now, this is what Joe said in 1942 to the Sporting News per the Shoeless Joe Museum. Quote, regardless of what anybody says, I was innocent of any wrongdoing. I gave baseball all I had. The Supreme Being is the only one to whom I've got to answer. If I had been out there booting balls and looking foolish at bats against the Reds, there might have been some grounds for suspicion. I think my record in the 1919 World Series will stand up against that for any other man in that series or any other World Series in all history, end quote. And CBS News' recent write-up of this whole entire story does cite Joe did admit to taking the $5,000, but as the research shows, maybe he didn't understand he was supposed to suck. You know, because that's the theory is that, okay, Joe took the money, but he didn't really grasp the concept because he was illiterate. You know, the guy went to work in mills at 7 years old. He wasn't a very well-educated man, as they said. That's one of the reasons why, you know, he's kind of a tragic figure in this whole thing, because he just may have been taken advantage of, you know, or maybe, again, he was given the money to just shut up because he probably may have found out. I know that's just one of the other conspiracy theories is he kind of found out what was going on. So they gave him some money to basically be quiet, that type of stuff. The rest of the guys that were throwing the series. However, though, he is eligible for induction through one of the veteran committees, although it won't be as soon. It won't be until 2028 when he can even be voted on. I think it's the 2027 that he'll get voted on. That's when he'll next be eligible. But when it comes to scandalous players, I'm going to go off the Alex Rodriguez plea for judge the player for what they did before the cheating. And I do think A-Rod made a good point, except for when it comes to A-Rod, there's an extensive cloud over him, and that's why he's never getting into the Hall of Fame. But I use that as an example. For example, just one moment here. Again, I have to keep hitting that cough button. But for example, Barry Bonds, I think he actually should be in the Hall of Fame despite, you know, where we had eyes, and he can deny all he wants that he didn't take performance-enhancing drugs, but we had eyes. But the reason why I still think he should be in the Hall of Fame is there were two well-researched books from three very well-respected journalists that detail when he started his alleged steroid use. And that was after the summer of 1998. So that's when he started. He basically started, he got jealous of Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, them getting all the attention. So he said, screw it, I'm going to do it. But before 1998, if Bonds is clean as documented, he was a 400 player, 3-time MVP, and one of the best pure hitters in baseball. And that's a Hall of Famer in my book. Maybe not first ballot, but that's definitely a guy who's a Hall of Famer. And Joe Jackson had a career 356 average with a career 940 OPS from 1908 to 1920. And that's when hitting was a premium. You know, guys were not crushing the ball until Babe Ruth started just hitting bombs. And if you only count that, you know, if you only say he was cheating in 1919, you still count that in the 1920 season. He had a 62.2 B WAR. That was his career B WAR. And his career OPS plus 170. I mean, the man hit in an era when hitting was a premium, when that was the skill, making contact. So for those that are clutching their pearls saying, if he gets in the Hall of Fame, what type of message does it send? Well, it sends a message that he doesn't get the profit off being a Hall of Famer. That's the same message that you're going to be sending to Pete Rose. Because you don't think Pete Rose would have made a few extra bucks at autograph sessions had he been able to sign Pete Rose HOF instead of Pete Rose, sorry, I bet on baseball? Joe did his time. Now let his career be properly honored outside of a movie. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I'll be back tomorrow to go over Luis Robert Jr.'s trade value with some crossover segments with the host of Locked On Reds and the host of Locked On Mets. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the White Sox impressive win involving key future core pieces And if Miguel Vargas is owed an apology from the fans, the upcoming roster decisions the team will have to make, and this week's Wayback Wednesday, you can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.